Welcome, everyone. I am Ana Alonso. I am one of the co-founders of Pure, and it is my truly pleasure actually to welcome today to this session and as well to the London Climate Action Week, which I think that is a pivotal event in the climate action activities. Actually demonstrate that together and independently we can do we can move and we can create action. It's our commitment to collaborate with communities, with professionals, and with other partners to really to make things happen. For me, if at the end of this week we have basically know or learn a little bit more, connect with other people, and start a little bit a first step towards an action, even if it is small, individually, but collectively will be a huge progress, I would say, because we will end by far better than we have at the beginning of the session. So I think that this is my call for all of us to really to make this London Climate Week matter and to do a little bit, even a little bit to progress it. So just before we go with the core of the session, I would like to please allow me to introduce Pure. Actually, and Neil, if you could move the slide. Yeah. So we are basically we started this as a basically in a session, in an alumni session of the Business Sustainability Management course of the Cambridge Institute for Sustainable Leadership with the University of Cambridge. We were in the alumni, a group of professionals. And we thought that if we would like to do more, we would like to contribute a little bit more to sustainability through our roles, but sometimes our roles didn't allow us to do that. So we wanted to be able to see how we can help with our business experience and our sustainability experience. So 8 of us came together and we basically started thinking what to do and thought that we wanted to change a little bit or to contribute. And if you go to a little bit to the next slide. So purpose is really at the core of Pure, because when we started our project name, we were called Purpose Reinvented, actually, and the company is called Purpose Reinvented, and from that it came Pure. So just as an introduction of this session of how really important is purpose within within Pure as well. If we move to the next slide. So things that we want to do, because we come from business with basically that sometimes, sustainability seems a little bit complex, actually. So we want to try to simplify, to make it really business focused, meeting the business where they are, and as well, no jargon, basically strategic support in a very simple term. And if you go to the next slide, very commercially driven. Yeah, so we want to really, and the next one, to provide value through the 360, actually, for all the stakeholders that we have in our core. So we provide, if you go to the next one, and the next one, actually, yeah. So what we do actually, and we try to simplify it as well, what our offering and how we see sustainability. And we have our 4 elements strategic framework that is basically try to help companies, business, and organizations in the 4 different areas that is basically around direction. Yeah, and here we start with purpose, as we are going to talk today, and vision, and a strategy, and we move to foundations, that is basically around the roadmap, the governance, and so on. We have a strong area of activation change management, because a lot of projects, they fail not because they are not well installed, but they are not well embed. Yeah, so we do a lot of activations with people. And finally, we have value, and it's basically how we grow the value, how we grow connection, how we grow partnership, how we are able to continuous improvement in this cycle of nature. Yeah, so if we go to the next one. So in this for the London Climate Action Week, we have 4 sessions. This is the first one, so we are kicking off today. And we will have, we will cover this one. We have another one this afternoon around strategy and why the strategy, how we standard is used, need to be changed if we want to address climate change and biggest challenge. On Thursday, we have one session around how we could activate and engage teams to really make sure that all the that we take that energy and really make actions happen. So we are going to have Climate Fresh, Biodiversity College, and change management practices. And finally, on Friday, we have our contributions with some tips and with some tools around how to do change management and transformation in sustainability. So that's basically what we have actually here. And if you and now actually without other further ado, we can move to the presentation of today. That we have a really interesting session. I would say it's a thought-provoking session of how purpose is vital in business and how a purpose leadership can really achieve more, and how the organizations can achieve more if you really are able to inject purpose really in the core of the strategy, in the core of the operation, and in the core of the culture. Yeah. So our speaker for today is, we are really very pleased to have Neil Gaught here, who is calling from New Zealand. And Neil Gaught is has spoken all over the world, and as well in the COP 26, and has working with business over 60 countries, I believe, from small charities to startups to big corporations, multinationals, NGOs, and even faith organizations. And he's based in New Zealand, actually, and he's a consultant, and is basically working as he's the author of Core, is how a single strategic idea can change basically the business for good, and he's going to talk us a little bit about this. And I think that he is working as well, actually, and he will talk a little bit more, with the international committee that is working on introducing purpose as an ISO standard. Yeah, he will talk us a little bit about that. And as well as his book, I have to say, actually has been recognized for thought leaders in business and sustainability, like Charles Handy, like John Elkinson, and Rod Markey. Yeah. And I think that much more accolades that I don't remember actually, and I will leave Neil to introduce himself actually. So the floor is you.
Okay, thank you, Anna, and thank you for that introduction. It's a real pleasure to be calling from. Yeah, I'm based in Auckland, so I guess the majority of the audience is in London. But it's a real pleasure, and thank you to Pure. And just to say good luck to you guys right from the off, you just set up, and I wish you the very best of luck. So yeah, I want to talk about two things. I want to talk about business leadership and purpose. I've split this presentation into two parts. I'm going to skip over the first part actually quite quickly. The why, why do we need purpose-led organizations? And then I'm going to go into the most important part, which is actually how, and how purpose as a strategy or governance framework is part of the solution, but with good frameworks and all the rest of it, and good processes and systems, you also need leadership. So I'm going to talk about the importance of leadership as well. I've got 35 minutes to go through this. I'm going to go through it fairly swiftly, so there's plenty of room for questions. So let's start off with why then. Well, I think we're all aware of why. It's around us all of the time. It's London Climate Action Week. I was at the, I think Anna said, I did a talk at COP26. I've been to New York's Climate Week a couple of times, and London before as well, and other cities as well. We're all very aware of the issues that how climate is affecting the planet and our lives. getting to the cusp of it, why business? What has business got to do about this? It's kind of quite interesting here, even here in New Zealand. You can see possibly that news clipping there is just from the 3rd of June. And what we have is a situation, even in New Zealand, where politically, short-term convenience means that the policies of the current government are very much around what can I do now in order to get re-elected, if you like. I'm not being political about it. I'm just saying that the short-term political convenience and agendas puts us in a situation in the world where this constant change of different governments with different political ideologies or views come in, and there's nothing static about that. There's nothing steady about that. And we just had this interesting case here with Christopher Luxon, our Prime Minister, where he actually questioned 26 of the world's leading scientists, turned around to him and said it's not enough to say things are fine as they are and we don't do any more harm. It's actually about us reducing the temperature and all the rest of it and hitting these goals. And on the other hand, the biggest company in New Zealand, a company called Fonterra, which is responsible for the great majority of the dairy exports from this country, were saying the way that they look at it is actually that they have customers, they have stakeholders, they have investors, they have other stakeholders who are invested in their company, and that those customers, those people who are very aware of what is going on in the world, are looking at corporations and saying, you need to help. You're expected now that you have the ability to help. And so that long-term commercial success for businesses now is very much tied into what kind of contribution they're actually making to society and helping, solve some of these world challenges, because climate isn't the only thing that we know that we're dealing with. It's not the only global challenge. And I think the vast majority of the audience will be very aware of the Sustainable Development Goals. There are 16 other reasons why businesses need to think about what their purpose is and how they actually are making a difference in the world. So, and there's no getting away from it, because as I said earlier, everybody knows we live in a hyper-connected world. News travels very, very, very quickly. Everybody is well aware of the issues, and it's not that they've heard it from somebody else. The vast majority of us have experienced climate change. We know what it looks like. We know what impact that it has on us, on society, whether you're in the west, the north, the east, or the south of this planet. We're all affected by it in one way or another. So everybody knows, and those people that do know and understand that business over the last, since the Industrial Revolution, if you like, is that business has been a major contributor to the issues that we face today. There's a real demand, and has been for a number of years, increasing every single year, for these businesses to actually get real, to stop hiding behind brand and corporate social responsibility, and actually to step up their contribution, if you like, step up their what they do in order to make positive changes in the world and have a positive impact on the world, as at the same time provide the things that people want and need. Okay, so that I got over that really, really quickly, because I think, given the audience, given the week that the London Climate Action Week, we're all very aware of what these issues are. What I'm really interested in, and what I've been interested in for a number of years now, is how. And really, what I want to do is just tell you a bit of a story and give you a little bit of background of why I got involved in any of this at all. 20 years ago, it actually started for me. So this is a very famous logo of a very famous company, British Petroleum, they were called. Back in 1999, I actually had been running a design and branding, a boutique design and branding company out of Chelsea in London. Quite small boutique company. We employed about 16 people at its height. And I sold that business and I went to work for WPP. Now, for those who don't know, WPP is was one of the world's, well, it still is actually, one of the world's biggest advertising communications companies. So they own a lot of the most recognizable ad agencies, PR companies, research companies, digital marketing companies, and a brand company. And the brand company, or several brand companies actually, but the one that was biggest by far and the biggest in the UK, and if not the world, was an organization called Enterprise IG. And I went to work there in a sort of a hybrid role because actually back in the day when I was at university, I was I trained to be a graphic designer. When I set up my design company, I actually got very hooked into the idea of strategy, and that led me into brand. So by the time I got to WPP, I operated in a kind of bit of a hybrid role where I worked on the creative side of projects sometimes, and sometimes I worked on the strategy side of companies, on brand strategy in particular. Now, this logo, I had nothing to do with this logo. This was actually created by one of the 26 companies this brand agency had around the world. And my understanding is that it was actually created in San Francisco, the logo itself. The strategy behind the logo, the repositioning of this business from being an oil business to an energy business came out of London and a global team as well. So this project back in the year 2000, 25 years ago, was about this business that had decided, given all of the evidence, and if you remember, Inconvenient Truth was around at the time. People started driving Toyota Priuses. There was this idea about the environment. Al Gore was running around talking about the climate. Others have been talking about it for decades beforehand, but it had become kind of quite mainstream. And BP and the leader of BP at the time, Lord Brown, Enterprise IG, the company that I was working with, was sort of presenting research and evidence, climate change. Scientists, often who worked for the oil companies, were presenting evidence. And off the back of that evidence, looking at the long-term future of British Petroleum, there was a decision made that we will move from being an oil business, which is not a finite resource, to energy, to become an energy business. And that logo, if you like, signaled that change. And that change was captured in this phrase, beyond petroleum. And that became, if you like, the mission of the organization, of this company. Many thousands of people working around the world, refining, exploring, and all the products that went with it. And here is what I kind of did. This is the kind of work that I did. I worked on many sort of brands. I worked on the periphery of BP. I was involved a little bit on the internal engagement of staff with this brand, with this shift. But I'd worked with Merrill Lynch and De Beers and Standard Chartered Bank on these huge global projects. And what brand strategy kind of came down to was creating this very, very simple and very straightforward framework where you have a brand identity, a mission statement, a set of brand values that underpin that mission, if you like, and a promise, a brand promise. And it looks like a very simple piece of paper, and it's very, very straightforward. To be one of the world's leading companies by providing the energy needed to drive human progress whilst protecting the environment. I mean, who wouldn't want to be involved in a company like that? So this is a very simple, but, months and months and months of research, months of sort of gathering information, understanding, the mega trends that were going on in the world and all that kind of thing. And it boiled down to this. And off the back of that, this is actually a screen grab from the BP's website back in the day. And this is the bit that I was somewhat involved with. This is Lord Brown right there. He was the CEO, the group chief executive at the time. And you can see there the words. The BP Helios Awards program is a powerful way to unite over 100,000 people under a single brand with a unified sense of purpose. So 20 odd years ago, this word purpose was there, okay? But actually, what I was in the business of and what my colleagues were in the business of was brand. We were brand strategists and brand creatives. Now, that was the BP Helios Awards were actually a way to award people that came up with ideas that aligned with this sort of brand promise of going beyond petroleum, or that was the idea. Because we're from a brand background, because I work for WPP, because WPP is a communications organization, very quickly we were or WPP was able to bring all of that expertise to bear, if you like, and that creativity to bear. And that's what happened. And as well as brand new sort of logos and brand new service stations and vehicles and all the rest that comes with a brand identity change, which signals a change, came all the communications as well. And the claims, if you like, and what they were doing. So these are actual ads from the time that would have been used in posters and within newspapers. But then there was an issue. There was a big issue. And in 2005, just 4 years after this rebrand, there was a horrible accident in Texas where a refinery blew up, a BP refinery blew up, and 11 people lost their lives. That was 2005. And then just a year later, in 2006, in Alaska, BP managed to spill oil all over the lovely Alaskan tundra. And then finally, and most famously, even got made into a movie, into then what was called the Gulf of Mexico, which apparently has changed its name to the Gulf of America, was this horrific accident in the Gulf and this Horizon tanker that blew up. And, you know, within the space of 10 years, what you could see was you had beyond petroleum, okay, as this sort of claim, but these accidents just on their own, let alone all the other things that actually BP was actually doing, you could clearly see that there was a big disconnect between what was being said and what was actually being done. And this is a really interesting little statement here. I actually picked this up when I was sat in an airport lounge at one time, just reading through Fortune magazine. I just came across this article, and it's really interesting. It's from an employee, and it says constant turnover only worsened matters as new bosses would seek to beat the previous manager's numbers. Nevertheless, this employee says that he still believes in BP's green ethos and retains his respect for Brown and other top execs. The values, he said, are real, but they haven't been aligned with our business practices in the field. Okay. And, you know, that kind of resonated with me. And I don't know, I just kind of sat there. I'd moved on from BP by then. I'd actually moved down to New Zealand. I was here for 7 years. I went back to the UK in 2009, and I've just recently come back to New Zealand again. But I kind of started on, I didn't have an epiphany. It wasn't sort of, I woke up one morning and thought, my God, I'm working for the evil empire here, or anything quite like that. I just felt that my future wasn't with WPP and that there's something wrong about what we were doing. But I kind of learnt a couple of lessons. You know, this very simple framework here, this has these very few words and this very simple image has the ability to actually unite, what was it, 100,000 people behind a single sense of purpose. That's a key lesson then. That's really important. You know, what's really important to say is brands are incredibly powerful and have huge potential to change things. So that was the first thing I think I learned. The other thing that I kind of learned was, you know, brand's not a good thing. Brand kind of tends to cherry pick the things that are good that it can say about companies, right? And kind of ignore the things that don't kind of quite fit with it. And at the same time, digging a bit more, corporate social responsibility doesn't kind of quite cover it either. That actually doing a little bit every now and again, that also doesn't work, because at the end of the day, you can just carry on doing what you're doing. So ideas around sort of shared value, you know, I spent a bit of time with Michael Porter's team in at Harvard, and Mark Kramer, and I could see that actually, let's not give corporations, if you like, the excuse to kind of dip in when it suits them. You know, it's all well and good saying, hey, we look after our farmers. You know, an American company saying we look after our farmers in Africa somewhere because they're growing the coffee or tea for us or whatever it might be, or providing raw materials for us. Well, of course you would do that, because you know they're you need to look after those people. But at the same time, if you're having arguments about not paying the minimum wage and the rest of it, then it just doesn't fit. It is literally cherry picking. And of course we call it purpose washing or greenwashing. And the results of greenwashing are this. What happened in the end, to a very long story around the oil business moving to an energy business, and there's lots of sort of background which I haven't got time to go through now. But what basically happened there was it ended up sort of being, because none of the other oil companies did the same thing, it actually ended up being a sort of just a sort of standard, hey, this is our point of difference, right? So in a sense, it was trying to create, it ended up sort of saying, well, we can justify it because in a sense, it's the difference between us and the other companies, Clearwater. But as we've seen with those accidents that I've just shown, what happened is that the business ended up in very dirty water. And the guy who was the CEO at the time, this guy Hayward, who'd actually just a year before the Gulf Horizon accident had happened, had said that all of this green stuff was nonsense. Well, he actually got fired, and he ended up in deep water. And we know what happened to BP and how they went from being number 2 and number 3 in their sector to being number 6 or 7. Okay, so I learned a lot out of that program, but I learned other things out of other programs as well, because I'd been a senior guy as a brand strategist. And just my experiences here in New Zealand, New Zealand's a wonderful place because, you know, working with companies here, there isn't lots of specialists. You have to be a bit more of a generalist. It means you really get across a company where brand people kind of do pretty much exclusively work in that communication space. Well, it's very different in New Zealand. As I say, you're generalist and you've got to make things work, and you've got to work out how you're going to do it. And that's what I said about doing. So, as I said, I came out to New Zealand, started working with companies really kind of quite intensely. I've probably worked with, you know, half of the biggest companies in New Zealand in one way or another. This is on top of the work that I'd done sort of globally with WPP. And then when I went back to the UK, I ended up working with the Gates Foundation. I worked with the UN. I worked with human rights organizations. I worked very heavily in the sustainability space. So I had this huge corporate sort of background. I had this kind of social sector material as well. And I started putting it all together. And what I ended up doing was writing a book. And this was my first book. It was published in 2018. And in it, I sort of scratched out the ideas from what I'd learned about the power of brand and all that kind of thing. And then thought about, well, actually, what is purpose and what are we trying to achieve? And today, and in the last 10 years, I suppose, purpose has become a word that we use all of the time, right? But I really want to explain what it is, because I don't think it's well understood. I don't think that it's been adopted in the way that we feel it should be adopted. So basically, what it is, and the way that I see it, is that purpose is about actually tying together your economic strategy and your social strategy into one thing that provides progress for all of your stakeholders. And that's kind of the definition of purpose, if you like. Okay. Now, what's really important about that is, great, that's purpose for you. But for me, the missing bit was this. When you have a brand strategy, you have the models, which I showed you earlier, kind of communications just follows that model, right? But with purpose, how do you actually embed it? How do you actually embed it into an organization? And this is when I came up with this, or came across this phrase, single organizing idea. And it came out of a guy, Jim Collins' book, Good to Great. Now, it's not a tool in there, it's not a process in any way. It was literally in a sentence when he's describing a tool, one of his tools in Good to Great, and he talks about a single organizing idea. And these words just leapt off the page at me. And I just thought, yes, that's what it is, a single organizing idea. So the first point is you bring these two things together into one single thing. Okay. The next point of it is that it is organizing. In other words, it organizes every single element of your business. People and culture, innovation, sales and marketing, systems and processes, products and services, your communications, financial, your leadership, all of it, all organized around this one idea, and that idea being your purpose. Okay. And that purpose then is that amazing idea that can transform the world and rewrite all the rules or whatever it might be. Okay. And Christopher Nolan has nothing to do with purpose or branding or any of the rest of it, but just a wonderful phrase that an idea can transform the world and rewrite all the world. So if you can find that idea and you can organize yourself around it in one way that brings both your economic and your societal goals into one thing, then what you've created for yourself is a governance framework. And that is what purpose, in my book anyway, is all about. It's not a strategy framework. It's not a temporary campaign like a brand is. It's actually the way that you govern, the way that you manage your business around this one idea. And it has many, many benefits. When you tie those two things together, we know today that investors are interested in investing, obviously, particularly pension companies, right? They're interested in investing their businesses in businesses that they know are going to be around a long time. When you have a single organizing idea, it helps you make financial decisions, procurement choices. It helps improve employee retention rather. It helps you start thinking about innovation, like in order to deliver on this purpose, what things can we think about doing that add to this idea? And yes, it adds to your reputation, where brand is all about reputation and all about image and the rest of it. Without purpose behind brand, it just doesn't mean anything. It is literally a paper tiger, as we've seen before with BP. So it does this. It attracts. We know that, and all the evidence shows and all the research shows that, the generations that are following out, the kinds of companies that people want to go and work for are these businesses that really have a purpose beyond making a profit. It attracts those people to bring with them new ideas. It attracts other companies, like-minded companies around them, to actually think about how they collaborate. And it delivers not only a sort of ecosystem, united ecosystem of stakeholders, it creates value right down that chain. And that short and long time value for creation is attractive not only to shareholders, because they can see, hey, this is a business I can invest in over the long term and support, but also society at the same time. So you're getting this kind of idea of sustainable prosperity over the long term and not brand sort of led communications over the short term. It takes time. If you identify that kind of SOI, and it's based on this sort of ideal position, if you like, where do you want to position yourself? Getting leadership to align with that is quite short, because almost straight away they can go and talk about purpose. Communication is the same thing, as we've seen with the BP example that I gave there. Very, very quickly you can go and communicate it. But actually what you do, behaviors and cultures are, where ideas come out of, where people are aligned with something, and that kind of reality of where the business is today and where it is going in the future does take time. But when that idea is really powerful, and when people are actually empowered to understand how they can contribute to it, then that you can move quite quickly. And I've worked with plenty of companies where that's happened in a very, very short term amount of time, and the return on investment has been very quick. That similarly with that kind of then that external sort of word of mouth about, well, this company's different. Okay, when you've got that really strong idea, leadership is still incredibly important, right? But this is like a network. If you look at these little flash, these light bulbs that are all going around, that one single organizing idea then allows other people in quite flat organizations, no need so much hierarchy, to actually start thinking about and contributing through the way that they do things and why they do things that contribute to the greater cause, if you like. And all of that can be measured, and all of that can lead to continuous improvement. So by putting internal learning loops and external learning loops, where you're going back and saying, we've done this, does it fit? Let's have a conversation. How do we make it better? Relaunching, refining, and that kind of thing. This is a real organic, dynamic organization that's working all the time. So how do you get there? Really, really quickly. It's just like any other organization. You've got to go any other process. You've got to go and do your homework. You've got to go and understand, what is the future for our business? How does it fit? How do we come up with an idea that both ticks that box of economic, commercial success and societal success at the same time? Put the framework together. You can see there values, positioning, and the SOI, the single organizing idea, or you can call it a core purpose if you like. I'm pretty wedded to single organizing idea because I think it says it does what it says what it does on the tin, rather than just saying purpose, which is open to interpretation. I double down on SOI because I just think it does exactly what it says on the tin. And then the actual alignment part, that's the organizational development, and that goes through all of those business functions. And importantly, you're measuring this stuff as you go. And I've done this with lots of companies, probably over 100. Here are just a few of them. American NGO, Partners for Good, global human rights organization, Promote and Protect, Building Better Communities, New Zealand's largest now construction company. Their single organizing idea is building better communities. Maximize Circular Value, Dutch logistics company, in fact, the largest logistics company in Europe. Circular economy, moving fruit and vegetables around Europe and actually in America now, and I think even in Asia. So getting down to those couple of words or 3 words, obviously that's only half the story, but just to fly through these last 3 slides, here's Hawkins, building better communities. There's the 4 values. You can see in the model here that it's not that different from BP's, right? The difference is this is about purpose and not brand. This is not about what you're communicating to the outside world. This is actually how the business itself is governed and the decisions that are being made in the decision on a daily basis. And here, you can see statements being made by the chief executive, the leadership, if you like, what people are saying in the community. You can see people signing up to Building Better Communities when it was launched, and you can see the buildings. And just the commercial case for this, Hawkins is a New Zealand business. The CEO, after this work had been done, I think, um, um, talked a lot about how much the business had grown as a result of it. So the business had grown. And the reason why the business had grown is that it was able to win projects that it wasn't able to win before. And very famously in Papua New Guinea overseas, it won a business basically because what it talked about was how we're not building buildings here, we're actually helping build better communities. Now, what's exciting about all of this stuff is that, as Anna said at the beginning, for the past year, extremely talented and smart woman called Dr. Victoria Hirth and her colleagues have started the process of making purpose a global standard. And I'm very privileged to be part of that team. And by the end of next year, global standard, this governance standard 37011 will be a published standard. And where we've got B companies and all the rest of it, which are absolutely fantastic. Now we've actually got something that says, this is what purposes is, this is how it's defined, and this is how you can actually use it and you can align your business with it. So it's really exciting. I'm flying through as quick as I can, Anna, on the back end of this. So I've talked about frameworks and I've talked about single organizing idea. And, and I kind of felt very much, I'm learning all the time myself, right? But I know this works. I know that you can change businesses. I know that you can help them transition and pivot. But what's really important is leadership. It is massively important because at the end of the day, purpose can't fix the systems that we've created. I'm talking about the macro systems, the way that markets run and all the rest of it. But it can fix the enterprises that feed it. And those are the businesses, predominantly businesses. There are, of course, non-profits as well that also feed that system. But by and large, it is corporations, big, small, and medium sized that feed that. So I want to emphasize this. It can't do that. And to make change, it's a journey. And that journey takes time, it takes planning, it takes resources, and it takes leadership, because at the end of the day, some of it's born out of ignorance, some of it's born out of agendas, some is born out of political disagreements. The left wants this, the right wants that. I count myself as pretty much as possible right down the middle. I just see this as common sense. We have many, many global challenges. There's got to be a common sense way of going about helping us get through this very troubled time that we've entered into. So what you've got is on the top there, you've got urgency and momentum and collaboration and technologies helping and transparent. We've got the technology already for renewable energy. We know that. When I was in New York before COVID, we had Jeffrey Sachs there, the economist, saying, look, we already have the technology. It's actually about the will to actually get behind it and make it real. And then you've got the people that have got a short-term agenda, whether they're politicians or whether they run companies that are only going to thrive, in the next few years, that shareholders can be very, very short-sighted. And so they're in the business of, denying and delaying and disrupting things and slowing things down. So it's a struggle and you have to fight and you have to have courage. And one of those people that's done that, of course, is the poster child of sustainability. And that was Paul Polman at Unilever. And what he did at Unilever really proved that this was all entirely possible, that you could move a huge business, one of the biggest FMCG businesses on the planet. You could actually move it. And here's that very, very simple structure thing. Okay. But he went and took on the markets and said, we can't do this quarterly reporting anymore. We need to build sustainability into everything we do. And that's exactly what he did, with his leadership and with the model that they created themselves. And this is going to be my key point in a moment, is that, the brands there, they all did you know, and the brands that didn't kind of got kicked out and they didn't invest in them. And the brands that were kind of able to get there, but not quite get there, you know, they invested in, so that they all started aligning with this sustainable living plan. And that obviously had an impact internally with cultures and behaviors and products and new ideas and all the rest of it. And then externally as well with consumers who showed their preference for products that are sustainable. And hey, here's the commercial result, right? That actually, over and over again, if you go and look at research, you will see that businesses that are run purpose-driven companies outperform others in their sectors. And this is just an example of some very large organizations around the world. Okay, but that's how it counts. Now, this is my final slide. Today, the world's most progressive businesses are anchored by a clear core purpose, a reason for being or why that shapes everything that they do. Single organizing idea, the framework that I've explained, helps you define that purpose and then ensure that everything, your strategies even, culture, operations, and governance is aligned with it, so your business can lead with clarity and compete with conviction. And here's the point, right? Every business that I look at, because there isn't a standard framework for how you do this, okay? So Unilever had its way of doing it. I've just written an article on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago about a brilliant business and a brilliant entrepreneur, Patrick Grant from the Sewing Bee, and his business, which is entirely purpose-led. But in each and every one of those cases, they've kind of done it themselves internally. They've worked it out themselves. And what my mission is to actually share single organizing idea, not as an off the peg framework for how you do it, but it is pretty much that. And the second book that I wrote, and I kind of gave all my information around, was a playbook that I published back in 2021, 22, which explains exactly how you can do it and how that framework works. Okay, Anna, I'm exhausted. I got through that.
Um, Excellent,
you.
Neil. Actually, thank you for this. I mean, for me, it's a thought-provoking session because it's the interesting to see that leadership or purpose-driven leadership is not just about aspiration. It has a really strong framework of how to make this happen, actually across the strategy, the operations, and the people there, which I don't think that all the organizations, they do when they start thinking about purpose. And this is, for me, this is the aha. Actually, we are going to open the session for Q&A. But before we do that, I have one, actually, I have this one, and we are in the London Climate Action Week, yeah? So what is the advice that you will give to the people here and the organizations that want to start to drive purpose within the organizations towards climate action?
Yeah, we're talking about businesses here, right? How do businesses actually do something? And I think the first thing that you can do is really understand what the purpose of your business is. Like, what is it beyond making profit? What is it actually about? And I think that's the starting point, frankly. And when you go and sort of understand where your business fits in with all the other businesses that are possibly doing pretty much the same sort of thing, you know, you might talk about how you collaborate with others to actually work together on what your purpose might be, or go and look at what other organizations. I do a lot of benchmarking. If I'm working in the construction industry, it wouldn't be unusual for me to go and look at what's happening in health, for instance. So it's actually about being really open-minded, really curious. But I think the other thing is as well is to understand this, right? And somebody said this just to me today. None of this stuff that I've just talked about now is in the business schools. It's not in, you know, and it certainly wasn't in the business schools 30 years ago, when many of the people that are on boards of businesses today know how to run businesses. I think the way businesses are run today, you need to not throw away the rule book entirely, but you need to have a really good think about it. You can't change the market and the pressures of the market, but you can change your enterprise.
Thank you, Neil. We have, I think that a couple of questions on the chat. Actually, I will invite as well the audience. If you want to ask a question, raise your hand. But in the chat, we have, they are interested in your take on shareholder complexity, as they often have conflicting priorities. What is your guidance to navigate this? And also around the view on how businesses, especially US headquarters, can navigate the anti-purpose D&I sustainability pressure that they have.
Yeah. Two really good questions. So stakeholder complexity. So yeah, you have primary and secondary stakeholders, and in the playbook I describe how where by using a very simple tool you can understand how important these different stakeholders, different types of stakeholders are to you, right? So their perception of your organization and their kind of commitment to it as well. And you can look at that sort of matrix, if you like. So you can actually set out who these different stakeholders are and what their agendas are. Okay. One of the things that I thought, Polman did very brilliantly is over time, they managed at Unilever to completely change the complexion of their board. Okay, so it became much more diverse. There was lots more representation from different stakeholder groups. So I think that's another thing. Obviously, when you've got shareholders, what's interesting is shareholders in banking and oil companies and all the rest of it. You see now they're much more activist. They don't want to be associated with businesses that other people see as kind of pariah businesses. Okay, so they do care about these things, and so it's about that kind of education. One of the really most important things is, and the reason why you need to go about this in a very managed, a measured way, this research at the beginning, is to make sure that you do talk to all of the stakeholders, in one way or another. So I go out of my way and with my team to interview as many people as we can. We'll run workshops. We will try and cover an entire organization by just running a couple of micro surveys. But what's really important is to give people, stakeholders, not only the opportunities to speak and to view their and to make their views known, but actually give them the tools that allow them to do that, right? That enable them to do that. That's a really important point. Like people, we know people, some people are introverts. I'm quite clear an extrovert. Some people talk a lot, some people don't. So actually giving them the tools so you can give them the voice to talk about things. You'd be quite surprised how people, I can honestly say this, some of the biggest detractors at the beginning of a project that I've done where you're pivoting or transitioning a company to become purpose-led, the most critical people at the beginning of it, they will let you know. But honestly, I'm genuinely saying this. In my experience, the most critical people at the end have been the greatest supporters. And the other impact of it is as well is that I've seen people literally in tears when one of these purposes has been revealed by leadership. This is the direction we're going in. It's kind of that emotional and rational thing coming together at the same time. Just to answer Millie's second question there, well, I would ignore the headlines somewhat out of the States. I think that the billionaire bros out of California are bending the knee, and they have to because they need to bend the knee, or else they're going to get shut down. Okay. There are other businesses that have been quick to bend the knee as well for whatever reasons, political, all the rest of it. But there are, if you actually, and I've worked in America a lot, and the vast majority of my clients over the last 10 years have actually been out of the States. They are not giving up on DEI and all the rest of it. It is there. It's there because that is the trajectory, frankly, of humanity, and that's where humanity wants to go. So when you look at political upheavals, and we may well be in this for a decade or so, I've got no idea. But what I see and the messages that I'm getting from my friends in America and the people that I've worked with in America is don't believe all the headlines. We are actually committed to doing this and moving this way forward.
Thank you, Neil. I mean, there are few other questions actually on the chat that we are going to take now, but I would like to remind to the participants, I put survey actually to give us improve the sessions. If you want to get as well the slides of this presentation, please fill that. And if you want to join other sessions of us, I am putting as well the link to Pure actually there. So you have that. So having that out of the way, there are very interesting questions here. Actually, it's around, should we change the narrative? Could you help us to understand how to navigate the short-term versus the long-term purpose? And there is another one around how to better connect purpose and align the strategy to measure impact. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's be clear about what purpose is, right? So purpose is enduring. Purpose is not a campaign or, you have it for 10 years and your vision and mission. I'm not a big fan of vision and mission, right? I think that if you know what your purpose is, the rest of it, how you get there, how you achieve that purpose and the outcomes that you want from that purpose kind of come with it. But mission and vision, when a new CEO comes in, or new leadership team, or a new even a new communications manager comes in, they come in with their own strategies and their own ideas, and suddenly everything's been washed away. When you identify a purpose, it is for the very long term. It is an enduring thing. We are in the business of doing this. So when you sort of say, can you change the narrative? I think that, what I hear a lot is, this is soft stuff. This is fluffy stuff. This is wokey stuff and all this kind of thing. But actually, it's not. It's about actually how you run businesses really, really effectively. I don't think it's about changing the narrative. I think it's explaining as clearly as possible what purpose is and why it's completely different from brand. We start brand strategists. We need brand strategists. You need fantastic communicators and all the rest of it. But purpose comes first. So it has to start with that. And the way that I work is that, as I said, I go out of my way with my team, with our methodology, to engage as many people in doing that homework at the beginning. And here's another kind of key insight. Purpose isn't something you make up, right? It's not something that you're doing in an advertising agency, sitting there thinking, wouldn't this be cool? What a great idea. And you can justify cool things and great ideas and the rest of it. Purpose is something that you uncover. And I talk about this a lot in my first book. Purpose is a thing that when you talk to lots of people, your kind of role, my role, is to sort of listen to people and hear what they're saying and then hear where they're saying the similar sort of things, but maybe not quite in the same way, and bring it together like that. So it's a lot. I mean, I talk a lot, right? But it's actually about listening a lot. It is actually listening, and it's about listening in lots of different ways. And it's about providing the tools so people can communicate to you in quite creative ways sometimes. How do you imagine this business being? What do you want this business to do? And it's quite interesting when you go back to speaking to all these stakeholders, and then you go back to the senior leadership and say, this is what people are saying. They quite often are shocked. And for senior leadership, quite often in businesses, it can be a little bit nervy. People are scared of change, right? But leadership can be more scared than anybody else, because it's like suddenly having to wake up to the reality of what your people actually think and what they actually do. So being an independent, I've always prided myself on being completely independent. Apart from my short time with WPP, I was with them for about 2.5, 3 years. I've always worked for myself, and having that independence has been very important to me. I have no agenda. I really just want to make fantastic businesses that can really make a difference in the world and make a profit doing it. And interestingly, with ISO, that's exactly what it says. It is incredibly important that businesses, whether they're for profits or not profits, they have to make their own money. It's really, really important. Or else you can't do all the things that we want to do to make the world a better place.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. I mean, there are other questions. I will invite these people. Actually, if you can send an email, I put there, and we can continue the conversation there. But just respecting everyone time, I think that we should close now. Neil, thank you very much, actually, for doing this session. It's fantastic one. And thank you to all the attendees. Actually, I hope that we provide value, and let's keep the conversation going. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.